The old man stood at the window of his underground office and stared at the screen showing the Pacific Ocean above him. Kong Taeho was 83 years old now. His hair had turned white long ago, and his hand shook when he held his coffee cup. But his mind was still sharp. It had to be. The survival of 8 billion people depended on it. 60 years ago, everything changed. Taeho was just a young soldier then, stationed at a listening post in the mountains of Korea. One night the computers went crazy. They picked up signals from deep space. Not random noise, not natural sounds, words, language, communication. Between beings that were not human, the world's greatest minds worked together in secret to decode those messages. What they found made their blood run cold. The Galaxy Council controlled most of the known universe. They were a group of 12 powerful alien species who had decided long ago that they would rule everything. When they found a new planet with intelligent life, they had a simple system. If the species was weak, they made them slaves. If the species was strong, they killed them all. There was no third option. Earth was lucky. The Council had not noticed them yet. Humanity was like a small mouse hiding in the corner while giants walked past. But mice could not hide forever. The leaders of Earth made a decision that would shape the next 6 decades. They would stay silent. No more radio signals sent to space. No more attempts to contact alien life. They would take down satellites that made too much noise. They would hide every sign that humans were anything more than simple creatures, living simple lives. And while they hid, they would build. Taeho remembered his grandfather, a brilliant engineer who helped design the first shipyard. It was built 3 kilometers under the Pacific Ocean. Thousands of workers lived down there for years at a time, cutting metal, welding holes, and building things the world above never knew about. They called it Project Silent Storm. Supreme Commander. A voice broke his thoughts. Taeho turned to see Yoon Hana walking into his office. She was 60 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been the Secretary General of the United Nations once, back when that title still meant something to the public. Now she led Earth's secret diplomatic corps. "What is it, Hannah?" Taeho asked. "Park Jin-woo wants to show us something. He says it is important." They walked together through metal corridors that stretched 4 kilometers underground. The base was a city by itself. 50,000 people lived here, and this was just one of dozens of hidden places around the world. The public above lived normal lives. They went to work, raised families, and never knew that beneath their feet, humanity was preparing for war. Park Jin-woo was waiting in his laboratory. He was younger than both of them, only 45, but he was the smartest person Taeho had ever met. Screens covered every wall, showing diagrams and numbers that would confuse anyone else. "I finished the analysis," Jin-woo said, his eyes bright with excitement. "Our weapons are now 3 generations ahead of the Council's technology. Our shields are stronger. Our engines are faster. Our ships are better in every way." Taeho nodded slowly. For 60 years, humanity had intercepted every Council transmission they could find. They studied alien technology. They took it apart in their minds. Then they built something better. Humans were good at that. Give them a problem, and they would solve it. Give them a challenge, and they would overcome it. "What about numbers?" Hannah asked. 3,700 warships, Ginwoo answered. "Hidden in bases across the solar system. The largest one is behind the moon. The Council has never looked there closely. They think we are too primitive to even reach our own moon." That was the great joke, Taeho thought. The Council believed humans were still fighting with simple weapons. They had no idea that Earth had sent secret missions to Mars, to the asteroid belt, to the moons of Jupiter. All hidden, all silent. "There is something else," Hannah said. Her voice was careful now. "Lee Sung-bin picked up new transmissions this morning." Taeho felt his heart beat faster. Lee Sung-bin was their best intelligence officer. If she found something important, it meant trouble. "A Council scout ship entered our solar system 4 hours ago," Hannah continued. "It is scanning planets. It has not found us yet. But it will pass close to Earth in 3 days." Taeho walked to a screen and pulled up the data. A small dot moved slowly through space, past Mars, heading toward the inner planets. Such a small thing, but it could end everything. Do we intercept it? Jinwoo asked. No, Taeho said firmly. If we destroy it, they will know something is wrong. They will send more ships. We stay silent. We stay hidden. We let it pass. And if it finds us? Hannah asked softly. Taeho turned to face her. His old eyes were hard as stone. Then the silence ends. And they will learn what happens when you wake a sleeping world. They watched the screen together, 3 people carrying a secret that would terrify the galaxy. Above them, the world continued its normal life. Children went to school. People laughed and cried and fell in love. They had no idea that their fate rested on a single dot of light moving through the darkness. The scout ship drew closer. Earth held its breath. 60 years of hiding? 60 years of building? 60 years of waiting? The mouse watched the giant's shadow pass overhead and stayed perfectly still. 3 days later, the scout ship left the solar system. It sent a simple report back to the council. System 7741C. Primitive species. No threat detected. Recommended for future resource extraction. Taeho read that report and smiled. They had fooled them again. But he knew the truth that kept him awake at night. The giants would return, and next time they would not just look, they would reach down to grab the mouse. When that day came, the mouse would have to show its teeth. The Galaxy Council chamber was a place of power and fear. 12 seats formed a circle around a floating platform where speakers stood to address the rulers of 1,000 worlds. The walls showed images of conquered planets, monuments to the Council's endless hunger. High Arbiter Velos sat in the highest seat. He was old even by his species standards, his gray skin wrinkled and his 4 eyes dim with age. But his voice still carried the weight of absolute authority. He had ruled the Council for 300 years. In that time, he had ordered the destruction of 16 species and the enslavement of 40 more. To him, these were not crimes. They were necessary actions to keep order in the galaxy. The scouts have returned from the Outer Rim, announced a younger council member. They found several systems worth investigating. One contains a primitive species called humans. Velos barely looked up. Primitive species appeared every few decades. They were always the same. Simple creatures who thought they were special. They learned the truth soon enough. Classification? Velos asked. Category 2, primitive. Basic technology. No space travel capability. They fight among themselves constantly. The scouts recommend resource extraction. The creatures could serve as manual labor, Velos nodded. Send Commander Dreth with a standard subjugation fleet. 12 ships should be enough. Give them the choice. Surrender or die. Across the galaxy, Commander Dreth received his orders with satisfaction. He was a warrior who had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. This mission was almost beneath him. A primitive species with no real weapons? His 12 warships could burn their entire planet in a day. His fleet jumped through folded space and arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system. Dreth looked at the blue planet on his screen and felt nothing but contempt. Open a channel, he ordered. Broadcast on all frequencies. On Earth, alarms rang in underground bases around the world. Lee Seung-bin was the first to decode the transmission. She was 38 years old, with quick hands and a quicker mind. She had spent her entire adult life listening to alien communications. This was the moment she had trained for. I have it, she said into her communicator. Putting it through now. In bases across the planet, humans heard the alien voice for the first time. It spoke in cold, mechanical tones that the translation software converted to words they could understand. Primitive species of the third planet, you have been selected for service to the Galaxy Council. You will surrender your world and your people. Your leaders will present themselves to us within 12 of your hours. If you refuse, your planet will be cleansed. There will be no second warning. Kang Taeho listened to the message in his command center. Around him, Officers waited for his response. Some were young, their faces pale with fear. Others were old like him, veterans who had spent their lives preparing for this day. "Get me you and Hannah," he said calmly, "and contact all fleet commanders. Silent protocol is now active." Hannah arrived within minutes. Behind her came Park Jinwoo and Lee Seung-bin. The four of them stood around a holographic display showing the 12 alien warships approaching Earth. "They are confident," Jinwoo observed. "Only 12 ships. They think this will be easy." "It usually is for them," Seung-bin replied. "I have read the records of 30 Council invasions. The average conquest takes less than 6 hours." Taeho studied the enemy formation. "Where is Captain Kim Nari?" "She is aboard the Gwanggaedo, behind the moon with the First Fleet. 3,000 ships ready to move on your command." Hannah touched Taeho's arm gently. "We could still try diplomacy. Perhaps if we show them we mean no harm." "They do not want peace," Taeho interrupted. "They want slaves." "You know this, Hannah. You have read the same reports I have. Every species that surrendered to the Council was worked to death in their mines and factories. Surrender is just a slower form of extinction." The hours passed slowly. The alien fleet moved closer. On the surface, governments pretended to panic. They broadcast confused messages, begged for time, played the role of frightened primitives perfectly. Every second of delay let humanity position its hidden forces. Then Dreth lost patience. "They are stalling," the commander growled. "Show them we are serious. Target one of their population centers. Fire a warning shot." A beam of blue light crossed the darkness of space. It entered Earth's atmosphere and struck the ground with the force of 1,000 bombs. Seoul, a city of 10 million people, saw a flash brighter than the sun. When the light faded, 40,000 people were dead. Buildings were ash. Families were gone in an instant. In his underground command center, Taeho watched the destruction in silence. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. He had been born in Seoul. His daughter had lived there with her children. "Supreme Commander," an officer said quietly. "Your orders?" Taeho closed his eyes. He saw his granddaughter's face. She was 7 years old. She loved to sing. Now she was gone. When he opened his eyes, there were no tears. There was only cold. Terrible purpose. He reached for the communicator and spoke one word that would echo across human history. "Rise." Behind the moon, Captain Kim Nari heard the order. She was 45 years old, tall and strong, with a scar across her cheek from a training accident years ago. She had waited her whole life for this moment. "All ships," she announced, her voice steady as steel. "This is Captain Kim of the Gwanggaedo. You heard the commander? The silence is over. Power up all weapons. We move in 60 seconds." 3,000 warships came alive in the darkness. Engines that had never fired roared to life. Weapons that had never been tested locked onto targets. Men and women who had trained in secret for decades finally had a purpose. On the other side of the moon, Commander Dreth waited for Earth's surrender. He expected tears. He expected begging. He expected the same pathetic submission he had seen from every other primitive species. He did not expect the storm that was coming, Kim. Nari looked at the stars and thought of soul burning. "All ships," she said. "Attack." Commander Dreth was reviewing reports when his second officer screamed. It was not a sound of fear. It was a sound of complete shock. "Commander, ships, thousands of them." Dreth looked at his tactical display and felt his blood turn to ice. Where there had been empty space moments before, now there was a wall of metal. Ships poured around the moon like water breaking through a dam. They came in perfect formation, moving faster than anything the Council had ever built. "That is impossible," Dreth whispered. "They are primitives. They cannot have the first shot," silenced his words. A beam of white light struck his nearest warship. The vessel did not explode. It crumpled, folding in on itself like paper being crushed by an invisible hand. In seconds, a ship that had conquered dozen worlds became a ball of twisted metal no larger than a house. Gravity weapons, his science officer gasped. They have gravity weapons. The Council banned that technology 1,000 years ago. How do they have it? Dreth had no answer. He watched in horror as his fleet began to die. Captain Kim Nari stood on the bridge of the Guangetto and gave orders with calm precision. Around her, officers worked their stations with the focus of people who had trained their whole lives for this single moment. Squadron 7, flank left. Squadron 12, target their flagship. Do not let any ship escape. The battle was not a fight. It was an execution. Human ships moved through space with grace that seemed impossible. They dodged enemy fire with ease. Their weapons struck with perfect accuracy. Every shot counted. Every movement had purpose. Park Jin-woo had designed these weapons in his laboratory over 30 years. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times. But watching it happen was different. The alien warships that had terrified the galaxy were nothing against human technology. 5 minutes into the battle, 8 Council ships were destroyed. The remaining 4 tried to run, Captain, a young officer reported. For enemy vessels attempting to flee, should we pursue? Kim Nari looked at Kong Taeho's face on her communication screen. The old man's expression had not changed since the battle began. Let one escape, Taeho ordered. Destroy the rest. But one must survive. One must go home and tell them what happened here. Kim Nari nodded. You heard the Supreme Commander. Target 3 of the fleeing ships. Let the 4th one go. 3 more flashes of light. 3 more crushed hulls. The last Council ship fled into deep space at maximum speed. Commander Dreth was aboard that ship. He had abandoned his flagship moments before it died. Now he sat in a corner of the escape vessel, shaking. His 4 hands could not stay still. His mind could not process what he had witnessed. 9 minutes. The battle had lasted 9 minutes. 12 of the Council's finest warships, destroyed by a species they had called primitive. Back on Earth, the news spread through the hidden bases. Soldiers cheered. Officers embraced. For 60 years they had lived in fear. Now they had one, but Kong Taeho did not celebrate. He stood alone in his command center, looking at images of souls still burning. 40,000 dead. That number would stay with him until his final breath. The Council will respond, Yoon Hana said, walking to stand beside him. They will send everything they have. No, Taeho replied. That is why we let one ship escape. We want them to know. We want them to be afraid. Hana touched his shoulder gently. The galaxy is watching now. Every species the Council has conquered is seeing our broadcast. They know Earth survived. Taeho had almost forgotten about the transmission. The moment the battle ended, Hana had sent a message on every frequency they knew. It was short. Only 7 words. But those words would change history. You struck first. Remember that. Across the galaxy, slaves heard those words in their work camps. Conquered peoples heard them in their occupied cities. Species that had been silent for generations heard them and felt something they had forgotten long ago. Hope. In his laboratory, Park Jin-woo was already planning the next phase. The Council would not underestimate Earth again. They would send hundreds of thousands of ships, the full weight of their empire. Can we win against their full fleet? Lee Song-ben asked him. Jin-woo pulled up holographic displays showing galactic maps. The Council controls approximately 800,000 warships across their territory. We have less than 4,000. By numbers alone, we should lose. Then how do we win? Jin-woo smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent decades preparing for this moment. We do not fight their fleet. We cut off the head. Destroy their leadership. Break their supply lines. Free their slaves. Turn their empire against itself. He showed her a map with dozens of marked points. We have had agents in Council space for 30 years. They have been waiting, watching, preparing. When the time comes, they will strike from within, while we strike from without. On the Council homeworld, High Arbiter Velos watched the battle footage for the 10th time. His 4 eyes could not believe what they showed him. His hands trembled with an emotion he had not felt in centuries. Fear. How? He demanded of his advisors. How did primitives develop such weapons? How did they build a fleet we never detected? No one could answer him. The greatest minds in the council had no explanation. Mobilize everything, Velos ordered, his voice cracking. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. We will burn that planet down to its core. No human will survive. His advisors bowed and rushed to obey. The largest military force in galactic history would soon move toward Earth. But in his private moments, Velos could not stop watching the footage. The way those human ships moved. The precision of their attacks. The cold message that followed. You struck first. Remember that he had destroyed planets. He had ended species. He had ruled with absolute power for 300 years, and for the first time in his long life. High Arbiter Velos felt like prey. The Council fleet assembled over 6 weeks. 800,000 warships gathered from every corner of the galaxy. It was the largest military force ever created. Enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. High Arbiter. Velos stood on his command ship and watched the fleet spread across space like a metal ocean. This time there would be no mercy. No offer of surrender. The humans would die, every last one of them. Begin the advance, he ordered. But Velos had made a mistake. The same mistake every tyrant makes. He believed his enemies would fight the way he expected them to fight. Kung? Tejo watched the Council fleet begin its journey toward Earth. He showed no worry. He showed no fear. Instead, he turned to his officers and gave an order that confused them all. Send word to our agents. Begin Operation Shadowfall, cross Council space. Humans who had lived in disguise for decades received the signal. They had been placed there years ago, living among aliens, learning their secrets, waiting for this moment. Lee Sungbin had recruited many of them personally. Young men and women who volunteered to leave Earth forever, to live alone among enemies, never knowing if their sacrifice would matter. Now it mattered. On a moon orbiting the Council's largest shipyard, a human agent named Beak Sumi pressed a button. Explosions tore through the facility. Hundreds of half-built warships were destroyed in seconds. The Council lost more ships in that single moment than they had lost in any battle for 200 years. Similar attacks happened across the Empire. Fuel stations exploded. Communication towers went silent. Supply ships vanished. The mighty Council war machine began to break down before it even reached Earth. But Tejo was not finished. Captain Kim, he said into his communicator, take the first fleet and strike their shipyards at coordinates 779. Admiral Yu, your second fleet will attack their fuel reserves at coordinates A32. Hit them hard and fast. Do not stop moving. Kim Nari led her 3,000 ships through folded space. They appeared without warning above a Council shipyard that had built warships for 500 years. All ships, she announced. Fire at will. The shipyard died in minutes. Metal structures that had taken generations to build became floating debris. Before the Council could respond, Kim Nari's fleet had already jumped to their next target. This was Tejo's true strategy. He never planned to meet the Council fleet in open battle. He planned to destroy everything that fleet needed to survive. No fuel meant ships could not move. No supplies meant crews would starve. No communications meant commanders could not coordinate. Park Jinwoo had calculated everything perfectly. By the time the Council fleet reached Earth's solar system, they would be exhausted, confused, and surrounded by chaos. But humanity had another weapon. One that Velos had never considered. Yunhana broadcast across the galaxy, not as a warrior, but as a voice of freedom. She spoke to the enslaved species. She spoke to the conquered peoples. She told them about Earth. She told them that the Council could be beaten, and then Ambassador Rin stepped forward. Rin was an alien who had served the Council for 100 years. She was the one who had secretly warned Earth decades ago when she realized what the Council planned for humanity. She had been waiting for this moment. Her face appeared on screens across the galaxy. Her voice reached billions of beings who had never dared to hope for freedom. I am Ambassador Rin. For 100 years I served the Council. I watched them enslave worlds. I watched them murder species. I said nothing. I was a coward. She paused, her alien eyes wet with emotion. But the humans taught me something. They showed me that even the smallest creature can stand against the strongest tyrant. They hid for 60 years. They built in secret. They waited. And when the council struck, they struck back harder. If they can resist, so can you. Rise up. Fight back. The council's time is over. Her words spread like fire through dry grass. On slave worlds, workers stopped working. On conquered planets, people took up weapons they had hidden for generations. On council ships, alien crews who had been forced to serve began to turn against their masters. The mighty empire was tearing itself apart. High Arbiter Velos watched his perfect plan collapse. His supply lines were cut. His shipyards were burning. His slaves were rebelling. And his great fleet, the largest ever assembled, was running out of fuel in the middle of empty space. We must retreat, his advisors begged. Regroup. Find new supplies. Retreat to where? Velos screamed. The humans are everywhere. Our own people are turning against us. There is nowhere to go. He was right. Tejo had planned this for 60 years. Every move, every attack, every broadcast was designed to bring the council to this moment. Powerful but helpless. Mighty but alone. Yunhana sent one final message to Velos. Her face was calm. Her voice was steady. I, Arbiter. I offer you a choice. Disband the council. Free all enslaved species. Face justice for your crimes. If you accept, no more of your people need to die. Velos stared at her image with hatred burning in his 4 eyes. I will never surrender to primitives. I will destroy your world if it is the last thing I do. He ordered his fleet to continue toward Earth. Even without supplies, even without support, he would reach the human homeworld. He would make them pay. Tahoe received word of Velos's response. He nodded slowly, as if he had expected nothing else. Then we end this ourselves, he said. All fleets, prepare for Operation Homecoming. We jump directly to the council homeworld. We finish this where it started. Kimnari gathered her ships. 10,000 human vessels from all 3 fleets united for the final battle. They powered their engines and aimed for the heart of the enemy empire. The mice were coming for the giants. The human fleet appeared above the council homeworld without warning. 10,000 warships filled the sky, blocking out the stars. Below them lay the capital of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. High. Arbiter Velos was not there to see it. He was still leading his crippled fleet toward Earth, too proud to turn back. But the council members who remained watched the human ships descend with terror in their hearts. Kim, Nari, stood on the bridge of the Guangetto and looked down at the alien world. Tall buildings reached toward the sky. Rivers flowed through ancient cities. Billions of beings lived on that planet, most of them ordinary people who had nothing to do with their leaders' crimes. Captain, her weapons officer reported. All ships in position. We can begin bombardment on your order. Kim Nari shook her head slowly. No, we are not here to destroy. We are here to end this. She opened a channel to the council chamber. This is Captain Kim Nari of Earth's Defense Fleet. Your military is broken. Your empire is falling. Your arbiter abandoned you to chase revenge he will never get. Surrender now, and no one else needs to die. The council members looked at each other. For generations, they had made others surrender. They had never imagined being on the other side, but before they could respond, alarms rang across their command center. Velos appeared on their screens, his face twisted with rage. Do not listen to them, he screamed from his distant ship. Activate the final protocol. If we cannot have that world, no one will. The final protocol. A weapon so terrible that even the council had sworn never to use it. A device that could tear a planet apart from within, killing everyone on its surface, including the council members themselves. The weapon began to charge. On the surface below, the ground started to shake. Millions of beings felt their world tremble and knew something horrible was coming. Supreme Commander Kim Nari called urgently. They are activating a planet killer. If they succeed, billions will die, including our own forces in orbit. Kong Taeho's voice came through calm and steady. The weapon will not fire. Park Jinwoo, report. Jinwoo's face appeared on the screen, smiling the tired smile of a man who had not slept in days. We disabled their final protocol 3 years ago. One of our agents replaced critical components with fakes. The weapon will try to fire, but it will only produce a small explosion in its own chamber. Seconds later, a small flash appeared in the Council's weapons facility. No planet killer. No destruction. Just a puff of smoke that ended 1,000 years of threats. The Council members stared at their failed weapon with blank faces. They had no more cards to play. No more tricks to try. Yoonhana's shuttle descended through the atmosphere and landed outside the Council chamber. She walked through the massive doors alone, without weapons, without guards. Just an old woman in simple clothes facing the rulers of a galaxy. I could have sent soldiers, she said quietly. I could have sent bombs. But I came myself because I want you to understand something. She walked to the center of the room where speakers had stood for 1,000 years. We wanted peace. 60 years ago, when we discovered you existed, we could have tried to make contact. We could have begged for mercy. But we read your history. We saw what you did to others. So we stayed silent. We built in secret. We waited. Her voice grew stronger, filling the ancient chamber. You came to our home. You gave us 12 hours to become slaves. When we did not answer fast enough, you killed 40,000 innocent people. Children, families, people who had never hurt anyone. She pointed at them, her finger steady, despite her age. You made us choose between extinction and war. We chose war, and we won. Not because we are cruel, not because we wanted power, but because we had no other choice. The Council members lowered their heads. For the first time, they felt shame. Here are your options, Hannah continued. Disband the Council forever. Free every enslaved species. Release every prisoner. Open your borders. Let the people you conquered decide their own futures. And you, the ones who gave the orders, will face justice. Real justice. Trials, evidence, judgment by the species you wronged. And if we refuse, one council member asked weakly. Hannah looked at him with something close to pity. Then look up at the sky. See those ships? They will stay here forever. Every generation, every century, until you change. We have proven we can wait. The council surrendered that day. Commander Dreth was captured 2 weeks later, still fleeing toward Earth in his damaged ship. High Arbiter Velos was found hiding on a small moon, alone and broken. He was brought before a tribunal of species he had wronged. His trial lasted 1 year. The verdict was life imprisonment on a planet he had once ordered. Destroyed 10 years passed. Kong Taeho died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family. He was 93 years old. A statue was built in rebuilt Seoul, showing an old man looking up at the stars with determination in his eyes. Kim Nari became commander of the Galactic Peacekeeping Fleet. A force made of ships and crews from dozens of species, humans and aliens served together, protecting the weak and keeping order without tyranny. Yoon. Hannah served as the first human ambassador to the new Galactic Assembly. It was built on rules of equality and cooperation. No species ruled over others. Every voice mattered. Park Jinwoo led a research coalition that shared technology freely. Species that had been enslaved for generations now had tools to build their own futures. Lee Seung-bin trained the next generation of protectors. Humans and aliens learned together how to keep the peace without becoming what they had. Fought against Earth was no longer silent. Human ships traveled to every corner of the galaxy. Human voices spoke in council chambers where once only tyrants had spoken, and in schools across 100 worlds. Children learned the story of a small blue planet that hid in the darkness for 60 years, building and waiting and hoping. A planet that refused to die. They learned that silence could be strength, that patience could be power, that even the smallest people could change the fate of galaxies. They learned to never underestimate the quiet ones.